the drivers for instability, they continue operating at full speed.
So what does that lead you to conclude in the near term? Let's say the medium term, say that like the remainder of the 2020s.
Yeah. So first of all, on my Substack that you have showed, I argue that when Trump gained power for the second time, we entered what is a state of revolution, in fact. So prior to that, we were in a revolutionary situation. Now we are in a revolution. This is a nice revolution in a sense, because typical revolution is actually it's quite bloody, people getting their heads cut off and so on and so forth. So far, we have escaped the worst violence, although there's that number, violence in terms of the number of people getting killed has its definite uptick. It's much more now in this decade than in the previous decades. So it's been building up. All right. But most of the struggle between elites now takes the form of lawfare. All right. So first, of course, back before 1920, Trump and his cohort of counter elites, they were the subjects of lawfare. And it's not just Trump. I mean, if you think about it, a number of his associates went to prison, in fact, and others' lives were ruined. All right. And now, of course, it's the tables have been turned, and it is the Trump administration that's practicing lawfare. Actually, it continues because there is enough. The established elites, they are out of power, maybe in political domain, but they still control large swaths of the judicial system. And so this is a continuing thing. So Trump, for example, Trump administration has been weaponizing accusations of, when people buy property and, break law, essentially, by doing that. So I'm talking about suits against Letitia James, Adam Schiff, and whoever's that, the governor of a bank, people like that. So this struggle has intensified, and from the political point of view, it doesn't matter how you get rid of your political opponents, whether you kill them or you put them in prison. It's or destroy their political career. Their outcome is essentially this is what happens in every revolution. Counter elites have to clean they have to get rid somehow of the previous established elites. All right, and so that is precisely what's happening. So the prognosis for the to the end of the 2020s is that we will continue to have a lot of social turbulence. So my hope is that it will not tip over into hot civil war. So it will continue to be this reasonably nonviolent civil war. But it's judging by history that the probability that it would tip into a hot civil war is actually growing. And moving the troops into cities, it's actually it's a move that intensifies the probability of things going south, because you have people armed with guns who are not really trained that much to deal with urban, disturbances. So it is potentially a dangerous situation.
We actually had Stephen Marchand on our show, the author of The Next Civil War, a few months back, and he made the case and argued that all of the conditions needed for an explosive civil war, which would obviously be different than the North-South kind of situation of 1863, but some version of it exists right now. And he said that the only thing lacking so far is a sparking event, whether it's like a political assassination, some even ecological disaster, that some big, huge thing, or something else happens economically, some kind of a economic collapse that causes all kinds of chaos. What is your view on that question?
Yes, that's precisely. Well, I know his book, but he is his theory is verbal and it's not really science. I mean, which is fine. But what we do, we have studied several hundred of such cases, and so we can do statistics. And so his intuition is correct. Typically, there are root causes which I named. They build up slowly and fairly predictably. But the actual breakdown, that state breakdown that happens, has to be triggered somehow. And those triggers are highly unpredictable. So think about how the Arab Spring started because this Tunisian fruit vendor self-immolated. But, back in 1960s, a number of U.S. veterans, Vietnam vets, self-immolated. But there were no structural conditions that this could trigger. All right. So the same thing. So now we are in this very, very precarious situation when things can get triggered by assassination of a leader, or, for example, serious. United States cannot really go bankrupt because we'll just print more money. But if one of the ways that civil wars have been triggered in the past was when the government stopped paying the police and the army, right? And so then there was nobody to keep down the breakup of violence, and then the different elite groups would start fighting out. It's the cycle of revenge and counter revenge. Right, and that escalates very rapidly into the civil war of many sides.
And so what do you say to those people who say, well, okay, that may have happened in the past, but this is the United States of America. We have laws and balance of power and a lot of intelligent people, and that's just not going to happen here. We'll find a way to work around it.
And that's actually not such a bad argument. Because we have studied this crisis over the past several thousand years, we noticed that early complex societies were much more fragile. They were much more likely to do a true collapse when, half of the population would be gone. That would be civil wars, for decades there, and then somebody comes from the outside and picks up pieces. Right, and then as we come closer to today, the probability of such really bad outcomes has been declining, and the reason is we actually can trace it. It's because we have more institutions. Democratic institutions is certainly some of those, but not only. The more effective bureaucracy. So China, for example, is not a democratic country, but it has a pretty effective bureaucracy. So the states became less fragile, all right? And so this is my hope. That's why I hope that maybe we are now in a situation where our accumulated institutions will prevent hot civil war. So we will have it, all this instability will continue happening without thousands of people getting killed.
We certainly hope that's the case. My concern, though, seems to be that the trust in government institutions, which are needed to keep that from happening, continues to get whittled down. And if that gets to some unknown point, then we could be in trouble. That's kind of one of my concerns. Do you see historically any reason to think otherwise?
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's the breakdown of inter-elite consensus. That's it's a necessary condition for breakout of civil wars and things like that. Let me just go back. Why do I think that we are in the revolution? Well, we are in the revolutions. I define as in two ways. That one of them is revolution, meaning revolving of the elites, revolution of the elites, and that's what the MAGA movement is trying to accomplish. All right, they are now trying to replace the established elites, previous established elites, with new ones. All right. Second one, if some revolutions are transformative. They really change the nature of the state, and that's also what MAGA movement is attempting to do. Think about things like very clear in the political arena. that Trump is essentially destroying NATO. All right, he has turned around the previous elite consensus that maintained that we have to continue American supremacy, and control all the upstarts like Russia, China, and so on and so forth. And so that consensus has been actually breaking down here in the United States, although it still continues in Europe. All right. And so what's interesting is that, again, because I'm always thinking about the deep history, all right, it's, many people, people who watch your show, I'm sure they're familiar with geopolitics, and they know about, the Eurasian, the heartland and the rims, the oceanic rims. Well, it turns out that there are very deep historical roots to this configuration of geopolitics, because the main rivals of the United States, which is China, Russia, and Iran, they all arose on the shores of the Great Steppe. About 3,000 years ago, the nomads learned to ride horses, shoot arrows, and they became a weapon of destruction. And so the societies around them basically had no choice but to scale up and acquire institutions that would make them into big empires. And that lasted for, 3,000 years, essentially. But now there was another military revolution, which some historians even say Europeans as white inner Asians, right? So now we have Europeans from 1500 or so riding ships and shooting cannon. And so that created this pressure from the oceanic side. And so those old empires, now they had to reorient themselves against the pressure from outside. So United States is essentially providing that pressure that makes them become more internally cohesive and unified. So we saw that happen in Russia, which was a basket case in the 1990s. And now it is a fairly effective military machine. But more, the China and Russia are brought together by this external pressure.
As a matter of fact, we have this comment here from Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin just earlier this very day, talking on that issue.
China-Russia relations have withstood the test of the international situation and serve as a model of interstate relations. Eternal good neighborliness, friendship, comprehensive strategic interaction, mutually beneficial cooperation, and win-win outcomes. In recent years, under our leadership, China and Russia, in the spirit of their original goals and with determination, have been achieving fruitful results in cooperation. We are ready, together with you, to continue supporting each other in national development and prosperity, to steadfastly defend international justice and equality, and to promote the formation of a more just and rational system of global governance. Our close communication reflects the strategic nature of Russia-China relations, which are at an unprecedentedly high level. This was fully demonstrated during your May visit to Russia and our joint participation in the celebration of the 85th anniversary of victory in the Great Patriotic War. Tomorrow in Beijing, large-scale solemn events will be held on the occasion of the 85th anniversary of the victory over Japan and the end of the Second World War, in which we will take part together. And you have just said that there might even be rain, but I am sure that this will not overshadow our festive mood. And the Chinese armed forces, with their customary brilliance, will carry out this festive, solemn event.
And right now we're seeing a lot of coordination between not just China and Russia, but you can also add in a little bit of Iran, North Korea, who's also going to be at this event tomorrow for the first time since 1959, which is hard to believe. India was trying to join in with that, Brazil, et cetera, with the whole BRICS issue. How do you see that playing out, and how does that play into your theories?
It plays exactly into my theories. I have books like called Outer Society, which I published 10 years ago, which argues that cooperation, notice they all said cooperation many, many times. Now, my argument in that book is that cooperation is the necessary glue that holds our societies together. The question then becomes, how does cooperation evolve? Because cooperation is very fragile. It's easier for me to free ride, right, than to cooperate by giving my resources for the public good, right? So this is like one of the general laws of history, is that cooperation is nurtured by outside pressure, by threat, by existential threat. So whereas 3,000 years ago, the nomads were existential threat to those imperial states, now that existential threat is NATO, essentially. And that's why we see these countries both unifying internally, all right, and now they're also brought together. Think about it. Just 30 years ago, Russia and China were rivals, all right, and now they are in unprecedented cooperative agreements. So it's the general law. Outside pressure results in increased cooperation, internal cooperation.
Yeah, and we're certainly see that playing out there. Listen, I know we're running low on time, but just real quick. So given all of these things you're talking about, all of the models that you have come up with, if you had to put a number on it, I mean, or if you had to characterize it some way, how concerned would you be that we could go from this revolutionary phase or whatever into something that's more destructive instead of something that is reforming and constructive?
So that's a very hard question. In fact, there may not be an answer. Certainly, I don't know the answer. And there may not be the answer. Let me give you an explanation using earthquakes as the analogy, right? So with earthquakes, we know precisely where the pressure grows inside, all right, because the plates move in a certain way. And so there was a huge earthquake in Kamchatka. It was predicted 30 years ago, but they could not predict when exactly it would result in the quakes. Same thing, it's probably likely that the same thing with social quakes. It will be the pressure growing, and sooner or later, something will result in a real bad outbreak. That's why we need to get into reversing the immiseration, lethal reproduction, and so on, right? So that we remove those conditions. But how to quantify that pressure, at what point it will actually things start breaking, that's our science is in behind seismology. So I don't think anybody can tell you.
And if you had to, and just the last question here, if we could pick one main thing, what could we do to relieve the pressure and give us the best chance to go in a nonviolent direction?
Shut down the wealth pump. We should start. We should allow worker salaries to increase together with their productivity. All right. That's very difficult to do because the current system is extremely lucrative for economic elites who have become filthy rich on it. So, and they are the ones who control, newspapers, well, at least mainstream media. They control much of the government and so on and so forth. So, but if we can do things like what FDR did back in the, actually, it started during the early 1900s under the during the progressive era, and then it was clinched during the New Deal. That's when they shut down the previous wealth pump that caused civil war and so on and so forth. So we now, obviously, we are a different country, so we'll have to use a different set of tools. But our research shows that the only way societies can exit from those end times is by shutting down their wealth pumps.
And by shutting down the wealth pump, that then relieves the pressure on the immiseration of the population. Is that correct?
And that also shut down, first of all, it shut down the growth of the wealth holders, right? Because there is no wealth flowing up to them. And it also shut down the second part of it. We didn't talk much about elite aspirants because some of them are wealth holders, others are degree holders. So as immiseration disappears, there's much less incentive for people to go to college, and then college is enough, get a degree, and so forth. I've been a professor at a state university for 30 years. 90% of my students had no interest in education. They just wanted to have the paper with which they could compete in the job market. So shutting down the wealth pump will actually work both on immiseration and on elite overproduction. That's how it worked in the previous exits from crisis.
Fascinating. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on today and giving us some hope. A lot of the signals aren't looking good, and we're moving in a direction that are troubling, but it's not without hope, and we appreciate you illuminating that, both the risks and the potential reward. Thank you very much. And as a reminder to people, there's the End Times with Peter Turchin right there. Got a new book coming out, and of course, we suggest that you go to his Substack, which has current things on it.
Thank you for having me, Danny.
Always my pleasure. Thank you, and we appreciate you guys, and we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.